Hello, everybody. Welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you for clicking by. This is a rather important series which I have created for all of you out there. This is called the Noble 9, which focuses on 9 of the most important grape varieties used in the world of wine. So if you are specifically interested in a key grape variety like Cabernet Sauvignon, you'll find the information you need to know here. If you are studying, this actually follows the WSET Level 3 syllabus very closely. So it's remarkably useful for your studies and understanding for your challenging WSET examination. So let's go through exactly what I mean by the Noble 9. So these are the most important grape varieties for the wine qualification called WSET Level 3, where they give real significant emphasis on these 9 grape varieties. Featured in the large sections called the winemaking chapters, both 8 and 9. And that means because there's a lot of content, there is a high probability of the short written answer question on one of these 9 varieties. Okay, so we are looking here at series 1, where I go through all the key information about the 9 varieties. Series 2 will be short written answer question examples on the Noble 9. So here you are. Here is the series of the Noble 9. Of course, 9 parts, and we are looking here at part 5 on the very famous and very well respected Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, this one, along with the Riesling part, are available as free content, but all the other videos are only accessible to my subscribers of the www.winewithjimmy.com e-learning portal. So do have a look at that. Let's get stuck into what Cabernet Sauvignon is all about. So first of all, there are some nice Cabernet grapes there from St. Helena in the Napa Valley. It is a thick-skinned grape variety. Therefore, it has an abundance of color, flavor, and tannin. 3 of the things you find very significantly locked up in those skins. It's also late ripening. So in some of the colder areas that we can find this grape variety, or in cooler vintages, it can struggle to ripen fully. And that means that you can get herbaceous characters, which in some people's views are negative, and then astringent, grippy green tannin and the acidity as well. Now, winemaking options with this. So I'm going to go through winemaking options. We're going to talk about sort of pre-fermentation, fermentation, and post-fermentation. And then we're going to discuss its key aromas and flavors. And then we'll find out about where in the world one finds it. So we know that there's a lot of tannin in the skins of Cabernet Sauvignon, which is going to be kind of macerated. We're going to extract those characteristics, the tannin, from the skins during fermentation. So we typically will destem and crush. The stems on the whole bunches of this variety can often give further astringent character and herbaceous notes. So they're often discarded because we don't want too much emphasis on those characteristics. Now, Cabernet's thick skin means you get lots of color, and the winemaker may choose to maximize the extraction of color from the grape skins by leaving the juice on the skins before fermentation. So this is almost like a cold soak, a maceration pre-fermentation. Now, the actual fermentation itself, typically we ferment fairly warm, but not too overtly warm, 26 degrees to 30 degrees. That's warm enough for sufficient extraction, yet cool enough to promote fresh fruit flavors. Cabernet Sauvignon, you know, has high levels of tannin. Therefore, high temperatures and extractive cap management techniques are generally avoided towards the end of fermentation, especially if there is an issue with the ripeness of those tannins from the vineyard. If it's been slightly a wetter and cooler autumn, you don't want to over extract those compounds. Post-fermentation. So this is talking about really maturation. So a period of post-fermentation maceration, however, may be encouraged, and this is for a more gentle extraction of tannin and to also soften the existing tannins. Now, the structure of this quite famous grape is very much suited towards oak maturation and bottle aging. So you'll often find fairly extensive long times in wood. So the intense flavors, the medium to full body, and high tannins mean that a high proportion of new oak can be used without overpowering the flavors and aromas and all those other characteristics. French oak is widely used, typically 2 to 5 litre barriques, but you'll find American oak, of course, in other parts of the world too. The period of maturation can last from anywhere like 6 months to 3 to 4 years, but typically 12 to 18 months. Blending is something which is also done at this stage more frequently than not, and that is because Cabernet needs often a bit of blending. On its own, Cabernet can have high tannins, it can lack body, so therefore it's often blended with other grape varieties, typically Merlot, but also the likes of Shiraz in Australia. So blending could be of importance. Now, don't get me wrong, there are certainly varietal wines around the world too. Cabernet is, of course, at home in Bordeaux, in the Haut-Médoc. It's commonly blended with Merlot, as we know. There, it makes long-lived wines with quite intense, grippy tannins, and they will soften with time. And you'll find things like cigar, cedar, and blackcurrant characteristics. Now, outside Europe, it's often seen as a varietal and blended. The ripeness it gets is from the warmer temperatures and the longer hours of sunlight. And that often gives slightly fuller bodied characters, ripe blackcurrant, cassis, black cherry, and often intense tannin, but generally softer, rounder, and riper. So where in the world are we looking? Of course, we're going to focus on France. It is the classic grape variety of Bordeaux and the Haut-Médoc. It's also grown in the south of France, used for more inexpensive, medium-priced IGP wines, hence why this area is highlighted in the southern section. So let's talk about that left bank area. So Cabernet Sauvignon dominates the Haut-Médoc. It's also very important in the Basse Médoc as well, which is this area up here. So that is the lower part of the river. It's also important in Grape, which is below and off this map. The high stone and gravel content of the soils, certainly of the Haut-Médoc, this area, and then areas like Grape, mean that there is a raise in temperature, and consequently, these are the areas where Cabernet Sauvignon can only really reliably ripen. It can actually account in places like the Haut-Médoc for 3/4 of a blend. It's very significant in these areas. And from Saint-Estèphe that you see just here, which is a village nestled into the northern Haut-Médoc, and then southwards down towards Bordeaux city, you will find it being very highly rated. There are a number of smaller appellations, villages or communes, and a lot of the higher classified chateaux here, the Cru Classé, are located in this area. Famously, it's Saint-Estèphe, Pauillac, and Saint-Julien and Margaux. High percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon. They typically have a real concentration of blackcurrant with cedar and other characteristics. The wines can be quite grippy in their youth, but will have good, good aging potential. There's a bottle that no doubt you know, Latour Pauillac on the right-hand side. Now, typically with Pauillac, which is what you're showing you here with this chart, think of high acidity, high tannin. I've put the body down here at medium plus because I always find that really good quality Cru Classé has a little bit of elegance from this more sort of balanced Bordeaux climate. So medium plus, and then medium alcohol. Typically, they're sitting at about 13.5%, 13.5%. Elsewhere in Europe, So in some parts of Spain, the traditional local varieties have shown limited potential for quality wines, and the likes of Cabernet Sauvignon has stepped up to the plate and filled in the void. So Cabernet Sauvignon and the other international varieties are now established in areas like Catalunya, Navarra, but also La Mancha, certainly in the Diopagos that we find. Cabernet Sauvignon is also grown in Portugal and in Italy, in the relatively flat region of Tuscany, the coastal part of Tuscany, I should say. It is cooled by sea breezes rather than altitude. And this Tuscan coast area is the area that witnessed the birth of the first Super Tuscan. The original wine was made from Cabernet Sauvignon and sold for premium prices despite not being given PDO status. It was actually just a table wine. Super Tuscans were the turning point for the international image of Italian wines, and they actually really helped re-establish Italy's reputation for excellence. Many Tuscan producers have followed this example and make highly quality wines from international varieties, sometimes blended in with the local varieties as well. Many are bottled as Toscana IGT, but there are newly formed areas like Bulgari DOC and the Maremma Toscana DOC, which both permit wines to be made entirely from non-Italian varieties, including Cabernet Sauvignon. Bulgari probably being the most famed out of those. So we then go out of Europe to the rest of the world. And we are looking at California first of all. Now, Cabernet Sauvignon is the most widely planted black grape variety in California. The prime sites can produce extremely expressive wines that rival the best produced anywhere. And of course, the real evidence of this was the 1976 Judgment of Paris tasting, which opened up the international people's eyes to the quality of Californian Cabernet. Many of the wines are full-bodied with very concentrated ripe cassis flavors and prominent spice aromas from oak barrels. So I put here fairly high acidity. It's very typical in this area. Sometimes that might drop. High tannin, but very ripe and smooth, depending on location though. Full-bodied and towards higher alcohol. So all of the boxes lit up in stars there. The Napa AVA runs north to south for about 50 kilometers and is about 5 or 6 kilometers from east to west. To the west, we have the Mayacamas mountain range, and that borders Sonoma County. On the east, there is the Vaca mountain range, and that is what separates it from the northern part of the Central Valley. So really where this white area here, this is all pretty much the Mayacamas, and this area up here is the Vaca mountain range. Now, vineyards are found on both the valley floor, such as Stag's Leap district, which, let me get my pointy arrow out for you here. So Stag's Leap is the blue area just there that you will see. Yountville and Oakville. So Yountville is there, Oakville is here. And also Rutherford, not forgetting places like Calistoga and St. Helena too. So these are all areas along the valley, and they generally produce very sort of ripe expressions. And then we also find vineyards on the valley sides, on the mountains, the mountain sides, for example. So Mount Verdeer here on the Mayacamas, and then Howe Mountain, which is more on the Vaca side. Those ones tend to have real quite freshness, but also a lot of really grippy tanning behind them too, due to their altitudes. So yes, that's the Napa area. There's a lot more Cabernet grown elsewhere in California. In Sonoma County, which is across, so Sonoma County is found across the Mayacamas mountain range, much larger area and bordering the Pacific. There is an area called Alexander Valley, which actually sits really to the northern part of Napa. and up here in the northern part of Sonoma on the Mendocino County line. More fleshy, full-bodied, this area, quite famed actually, but it has soft-textured, full-bodied expressions of Cabernet Sauvignon. I think the acidities sometimes are medium plus or full. Tannins are fairly ripe. Body is fairly ripe, and alcohol tends to be fairly intense too. Other areas here include the likes of Dry Creek Valley, which is just here, as you will see, but also Mendocino County, which is off to the north of this area. Also look out for Cabernet Sauvignon as you head south towards Los Angeles. So you'll find some really lovely Cabernets around Paso Robles, for example, and other parts of the south coast. The central coast. Australia comes next. So South Australia is particularly famed for Cabernet Sauvignon, with Barossa Valley, Eden Valley, and Clare Valley, and McLaren Vale. So that is Clare just here, Eden just here, McLaren, and also Barossa. So all four of those quite famed for good examples of Cabernet Sauvignon. And I've highlighted them in red there, as you can see. But the most famous is the one highlighted in red down here. Now, as always, this is not an exhaustive list. This is for the level 3 of WSET. There are other areas as well. Coonawarra is the most famed. This region is a narrow strip of land, 15 kilometers wide, 15 kilometers long, with a distinctive terra rossa soil. So this is kind of like a red clay soil on top of limestone white bedrock. Under the influence of the cold currents from the Antarctic, it is a maritime climate and is moderate. Cloud cover moderates summer temperatures here. Cabernet Sauvignon is the dominating grape variety. It's made in concentrated, structured rinds with a lovely blackcurrant cassis core to it, but then with a very distinctive mentholated eucalypt note as well. The very best examples will age well. The example I've given you here is the excellent Wins and the John Riddoch at the top level of this, named after the founder. Also in Victoria, look out for Yarra Valley and Heathcote. The coastal region of Margaret River in Western Australia is also well noted for Cabernet Sauvignon. It has wetter conditions, but those rainfall conditions are winter-based. Cabernet is often blended with Merlot in Margaret River. I've just sort of mentioned it at the bottom of this slide. New Zealand. So Cabernet Sauvignon is often blended with Merlot in New Zealand in a Bordeaux-style blend. Like all very much New Zealand wines, they are known for the purity of their fruit character. Most of the Cabernet and Merlot is found in the North Island, where you have warmer temperatures to ripen black grapes like Cabernet and Merlot. Now, the area we're looking is Hawke's Bay, only second to Marlborough for production. It has a diverse geology behind it and also aspect and altitudes. One particular area is the Gimblett Gravels, which is a parcel of well-drained, heat-absorbing gravel soil on the valley floor. It has developed a particularly high reputation for things like Syrah, but also Cabernet-based wines. Here is a Hawke's Bay Cabernet Sauvignon for Villa Maria. Expect high acidities, moderate to high tannin, moderate to high body, and moderate alcohol with New Zealand Cabernet. South Africa comes next. And really the focal point of South African Cabernet is Stellenbosch, which is this area that's darkly highlighted here just off the north of False Bay. So this centers around Stellenbosch town, just north of Somerset West. And Stellenbosch is surrounded by lovely hills and mountains, the Botolari Hills to the north, the Simmonsburg Stellenbosch, which is towards the east, and then the Helderberg and the Stellenbosch itself. It's a real hub of fine wine production, and of course, where really a lot of the research and the enology is based. The climate is moderate to warm, depending on location. There's sufficient rainfall here in winter. Summers are rarely too hot, and thanks to the cold winds from the False Bay, that's one of the reasons why the temperature is a little bit dropped here. Stellenbosch, though, has massive diversity. in terms of altitude, aspect, and geology in such a small area. Stellenbosch's real red reputation is built on Cabernet and Cabernet-based blends, often with Cabernet Merlot. Here's Neil Ellis, Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon. Do look out also for Paarl and Constantia, which craft very lovely Cabernets. Typically, Cabernets of South Africa are moderate to high acidity, quite powerful tannins. I would probably drop this to sort of medium plus as well, but fuller bodied and towards higher alcohols. Chile is next. So Cabernet Sauvignon is the most widely planted grape variety of any color in Chile. The extent of the plantations mean that, of course, we have a big, wide diversity from very, very inexpensive, simple and fruity wines to full-bodied premium expressions. Typically black fruit and a herbaceous touch to the wines, blended frequently with Merlot, Carmenere, and Syrah. The Colchagua Valley is large and varied and very much noted for Cabernet Sauvignon. The central part of the valley is warm and open to some oceanic influences, so we're going in this way. I've highlighted on the map here where you can find Cabernet Sauvignon, by the way. So Colchagua is known for full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignon. The area has expanded, and there are some on valley slopes, notably called the Apalta, which have gained a premium reputation. You'll find Cabernet Sauvignon also in the Coquimbo in the northern area, Aconcagua, Maipo, the Cachapol, and the Curico, which are all the other places highlighted on this map. Elsewhere, we find Cabernet Sauvignon being planted in Washington state, some real important productions around Walla Walla and the Columbia River area, the all-encompassing Columbia River area. You'll also find it in Argentina, produced a lot in Mendoza, and we know about South Africa already. Okay, that brings me to a conclusion of Cabernet Sauvignon. If you do have any comments or questions, please do get in touch. Do you like Cabernet Sauvignon? What is your favorite? What is your favorite area out of everything we've gone through? And if you want to add some of the more unusual or unique parts of Cabernet Sauvignon, which have not been covered in this video, then please do also mention those. What's your favorite gastronomy? Have you visited these areas? Get in touch. Anyway, until next time, I've been Jimmy Smith. Thank you for watching. Ciao.